There are hearings where policy is debated. There are hearings where budgets are discussed. And then there are hearings where a member of Congress plays video of two American citizens being killed by their own government and demands to know why the cabinet secretary responsible is lying about it. This is that hearing. Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, just spent 10 minutes doing something I have never seen in decades of watching C-SPAN. He played the footage. Renee Good, 37-year-old mother of three, shot 3 times in her car by ICE agents on her way home from dropping her kids at school.
Deadly ICE-involved shooting out of Minneapolis. The Minneapolis police chief says a woman was killed after being shot in the head by an ICE agent.
Renee Good was a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and mother of 3 who moved to Minnesota just last year.
Alex Pretti, 37-year-old ICU nurse, shot 10 times by ICE agents while filming them in public, exercising his First Amendment right. And then he played Kristi Noem's response.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Calling them domestic terrorists, smearing their memory, lying about what happened. Raskin didn't stop there. He laid out the pattern. Court orders violated by the hundreds. A $220 million ad campaign featuring Noem on horseback. Luxury jets with queen-sized beds. A pilot fired midair over a blanket. A disabled refugee dropped in freezing darkness. 135 Texans dead while FEMA waited 72 hours for approval. This is not oversight. This is an indictment. Let's watch. I'll break it down.
From Maryland, the ranking member, for his opening comments.
Well, thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary Noem. We're glad to meet you, even though it's been 13 months since you took office and more than 5 weeks since 2 American citizens were shot dead in Minneapolis. Renee Good was a 37-year-old poet, about 20 years younger than you are now, and like you, both a devout Christian and the mother of 3. She was on her way home from school drop-off when she encountered an ICE operation, and one of your agents shot her dead, shot her 3 times. She bled out in the driver's seat of her car after your agents refused to let a doctor or EMTs approach her. You expressed no sympathy for her family and no regret for her killing by an ICE agent. You ran a smear campaign against Renee Good. You called her a domestic terrorist. Alex Pretti was also 37 and, like you, a federal worker. He was an ICU nurse at a VA hospital, outstanding in his job, providing comfort to many of our vets in their final hours. He was standing on a street corner filming your agents as they roughed up peaceful protesters. Americans have a First Amendment right to record government agents in public places, as 8 different federal circuit courts have unanimously found. But your agents pepper sprayed Alex Pretti for helping a woman that they had pushed to the ground. Then they threw him to the ground. They beat him up. They stripped him of a lawful firearm he had never touched. And then, after confiscating it, they shot him dead with 10 bullets. Before his body was even cold, you launched a smear campaign against him, using the same language, asserting without evidence that Alex Pretti had committed a, quote, act of domestic terrorism and intended to kill law enforcement. This disturbing video tells the true facts you tried to cover up with propaganda, and we can play it only because other brave Americans used their phones to capture the actual reality of this horror.
Deadly ICE-involved shooting out of Minneapolis. The Minneapolis police chief says a woman was killed after being shot in the head by an ICE agent.
Renee Good was a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and mother of 3 who moved to Minnesota just last year.
It was an act of domestic terrorism.
Breaking news in Minneapolis and another deadly shooting involving a federal officer in that city. This video shows the incident from this morning with officers surrounding a man before taking him down and shooting him during a struggle. Officials later said the man had died. Minneapolis city officials said the man is a 37-year-old white male, a resident of Minneapolis. They also say he is believed to be an American citizen and that he was a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Madam Secretary, you've provided no evidence to back up your defamatory lie against either of these American citizens. There have been 3 homicides in Minneapolis in 2026. Your agents committed 2 of them. Rather than work with state and local authorities to solve these homicides, you barred Minnesota's investigators from the crime scenes. You're denying them access to all the evidence that you have about the deaths of their citizens. It smells like a cover-up, and it makes me wonder who the real domestic terrorists are. But you didn't just lie about Renee Good and Alex Pretti. In dozens of cases, federal judges have found that your officials lied to them in court. A Reagan-appointed judge rejected the testimony of your acting ICE director as, quote, disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. Another judge called the affidavit of a top ICE official, quote, the sorriest statement I've ever seen, adding she was shocked when she saw it, and that if you were asking to get a warrant issued on this, I'd throw you out of my chambers. Here are a few more examples of the many scores we found in the case books. Yesterday, you insisted under oath to the Senate that you follow court orders, but that's not true either. Just last month, your lawyers were forced to admit that you had violated immigration court orders more than 50 times in 10 weeks. And that was just in New Jersey, one of 94 judicial districts in America. In Minnesota, Judge Patrick Schultz, a George W. Bush appointee, concluded, quote, that ICE has likely violated more court orders in January of 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. And while you make a daily mockery of our courts and our Constitution, you're treating the billions of dollars our colleagues showered on your department like a personal slush fund. You budgeted an astonishing $220 million for media consultant contracts so you can star in self-promoting photo shoots and lavish ad campaigns like this one of you riding horseback at Mount Rushmore, which was shot during last year's government shutdown. You're living rent-free in the official waterfront residence reserved for the commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. You spent $172 million to buy not 1, but 2 luxury jets for your travel, and now you're using taxpayer funds to lease a 3rd jet, a $70 million luxury 737 MAX with a queen-size bedroom in the back, a deluxe serving bar, and 4 flat-screen TVs. A big, beautiful jet paid for by the big, beautiful bill. Yesterday, under questioning the Senate, you said you plan to refurbish this jet to make it into this kind of airplane, which is what's actually being used for deportations in order to save the taxpayers' money. In other words, you're saying that's actually a deportation plane, but wouldn't it have been cheaper just to buy a deportation plane in the first place? It's like buying a Rolls Royce to turn into a Metro bus. I was almost prepared to buy that story of how the jet was both for executive travel and mass deportation. And then I heard about an airborne episode of entitlement, arrogance, and contempt that I could hardly believe. Apparently, when your special blanket, your blankie, was left on one of the government jets and not transported over the new one, your special government employee, Corey Lewandowski, chivalrously stepped forward to fire the pilot midair. A 2003 Coast Guard Academy graduate and distinguished U.S. Coast Guard commander in Air Station, Washington, D.C. But then he had to be rehired immediately because there was no one else who could fly the 2 of you on the rest of the journey back home. Secretary Noem, you're flying high now, maybe even a little bit too close to the sun. But with all these free planes and houses and pilots, you've traveled a long distance from your actual job and the things you should be doing as head of Homeland Security. Your agency is charged with protecting the homeland. It includes FEMA, TSA, the Secret Service, the Coast Guard, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, as well as ICE and CBP. Yet you've hollowed out the national security mission. You redeployed thousands of people responsible for tracking terror financing and fighting cyber threats to go work on your mass immigration roundup. You reassigned to the roundup agents working a key national security probe into Iran's terror financing, paralyzing that investigation. And to run what's left of Homeland Security's ruined terrorism prevention office, you actually installed a 22-year-old intern whose chief listed qualification for the job was that he had participated in a model UN club his junior year of college. Through FEMA, you're supposed to provide disaster relief to our communities. Yet last summer, as floods devastated central Texas and killed 135 people, including 25 girls and 2 counselors at a Christian summer camp, you withheld crucial support, including search and rescue teams, for 72 hours. Why? Those were 3 crucial days during which people drowned and died, waiting for bureaucratic approval. You promised to use ICE and CBP to expel the worst of the worst, undocumented immigrants guilty of committing violent crimes like the people responsible for murdering the children of these angel families, these angel moms and dads who've joined us today. Instead, your masked agents have been indiscriminately rounding up any and all immigrants and citizens who your agents think look like they might be immigrants. They've arrested kindergartners, daycare teachers, and parents dropping off kids at school. They drag grandparents out of their homes in their underwear in sub-zero temperatures and rip children out of their beds in the middle of the night or use them as bait to arrest their parents. Just last month, your agents picked up Nurul Shah Alam, a severely disabled and nearly blind Rohingya refugee, lawfully in America, who didn't speak English. You claimed your agents dropped him at a safe, warm location. Again, not the truth. They dropped him off miles from his home in the dark at a closed coffee shop in sub-freezing temperatures. And now, because of this cruelty, this man too is dead. You have 250,000 employees and a budget larger than that of 150 countries. You command over 80,000 sworn law enforcement officers, more than the number of police officers in New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, DC, Las Vegas, and Dallas combined. On top of that, our colleagues have handed ICE an additional $75 billion by slashing funds for Medicaid, children's health insurance, and rural hospitals. Secretary Noem, your job is to protect the homeland, but the most precious possession that we've got in our homeland is our freedom and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that protect it. You seem to have forgotten what our most precious possession is. The billions of dollars showered on your department have paid for violence and chaos in the American heartland and a sweeping assault on the basic rights of the American people. But the heroic citizens of Minneapolis have shown America how to fight back against this reign of terror and win with the truth, with solidarity, with mutual self-help, with creative joy and humor and music, with mass nonviolent assembly and protest, and with irrepressible love of children and kindness towards animals and other living things. You've turned our government against our people, and you've turned our people against our government. But the people are winning today, although we know we must continue to wake up every day, like the people of Minneapolis, and go out and fight for constitutional freedom. We are clearly in the fight of our lives, and we obviously have very serious questions for you today about what you are turning our government into. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
There are moments in congressional history that become defining. The Army McCarthy hearings, Watergate, the Iran-Contra hearings. This moment will be studied for decades, not because of what Kristi Noem said, she said nothing, but because of what Jamie Raskin showed. He showed video of 2 American citizens being killed by their own government. He showed the aftermath. He showed the lies their secretary spread about them while their bodies were still warm. And then he showed the pattern. Because this is not about 2 isolated incidents. This is about a system where court orders are violated by the hundreds, where federal judges call your officials' testimony disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable, where a Reagan appointee and a Bush appointee both conclude that your agency is out of control. Let's start with Renee Good and Alex Pretti, because their names deserve to be remembered. Renee Good, 37 years old, poet, mother of 3, devout Christian, shot 3 times in her car by ICE agents on her way home from dropping her kids at school. She bled out in the driver's seat while agents refused to let doctors near her. Kristi Noem's response? Called her a domestic terrorist. No evidence, no investigation. Just a smear from the highest levels of government against a dead woman who can't defend herself. Alex Pretti, 37 years old, ICU nurse at a VA hospital, spent his career comforting veterans in their final hours. Standing on a street corner filming federal agents, a right protected by 8 federal circuit courts. Pepper sprayed for helping a woman who'd been pushed. Beaten, stripped of a firearm he never touched. Shot 10 times. Kristi Noem's response? Called him a domestic terrorist too. Said he intended to kill law enforcement. The video shows otherwise. The video shows a man exercising his First Amendment rights being murdered by the state, and Noem's answer is to lie about him, to cover it up, to bar Minnesota investigators from the crime scenes, to deny access to evidence. That's not accountability. That's a cover-up. Raskin uses the word smells like a cover-up. It doesn't just smell like one, it looks like one. It walks like one. It talks like one. When you block local law enforcement from investigating homicides committed by your agents, what else would you call it? Then Raskin moves to the courts, and the picture gets even worse. A Reagan-appointed judge calls your acting ICE director's testimony disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. Those are not mild words. Those are not routine judicial criticism. Those are damning. Another judge calls an ICE affidavit the sorriest statement I've ever seen. Says if you asked for a warrant based on this, I'd throw you out of my chambers. This is not partisan. These are Republican appointees, conservative judges, people who don't want to believe the government is lying to them. And they're saying your officials are beyond the pale. The numbers are staggering. 50 court orders violated in New Jersey in 10 weeks. Nearly 100 in Minnesota in January alone. More violations in 1 month than some agencies have in their entire existence. And Noem sat in the Senate yesterday and swore under oath that she follows court orders. That's not true. It's provably false. It's perjury if anyone wants to pursue it. Then there's the money. $220 million on TV ads featuring Noem. $172 million on 2 luxury jets. Another $70 million leasing a 3rd jet with a queen-sized bedroom and 4 flat-screen TVs, a waterfront mansion rent-free, and the blanket. The blanket story is so absurd, so perfectly emblematic of this administration's entitlement that it would be funny if it weren't taxpayer-funded. A government employee fired a Coast Guard pilot midair because Noem's special blanket wasn't on the plane. Fired him, 30,000 feet. Then had to rehire him immediately because nobody else could fly. That's not governance. That's a satire of governance. That's the kind of story you'd laugh at in a movie because it's too ridiculous to believe. Except it happened. With real people. With real taxpayer money. With real consequences. The hollowing out of national security is perhaps the most dangerous part of this entire saga. Thousands of agents pulled off terror financing and cyber threats to work on immigration roundups. A national security probe into Iran's terror financing paralyzed because agents were reassigned. And to run what's left of terrorism prevention? A 22-year-old whose main qualification was Model UN. Model UN. That's not a joke. That's not an exaggeration. That's the actual standard now. If you can fake diplomat in college, you can run counterterrorism for the Department of Homeland Security. The FEMA story is the one that should haunt Noem forever. 135 people dead in Texas floods. 25 girls and 2 counselors at a Christian summer camp. Search and rescue teams held back for 72 hours. Waiting for bureaucratic approval. 3 days. People drowned. Children drowned. While Noem's department dithered. And for what? To protect what? To prove what? There's no justification. There's no explanation. There's only the cold reality that under this administration, government has become something unrecognizable, something that kills its own citizens and then lies about it, something that violates court orders by the hundreds and then claims to follow them, something that spends billions on self-promotion while letting people drown, something that fires pilots over blankets and hires 22-year-olds with Model UN experience to fight terrorism. Raskin ends with the people of Minneapolis, the ones who filmed these killings, who protested, who refused to look away, who used their phones to document what their government was doing so the rest of us could see it. They are winning, he says, because the truth is on their side, because video doesn't lie, because no amount of propaganda can erase what those cameras captured. Renee Good bleeding out in her car. Alex Prey shot 10 times. A disabled refugee dropped in freezing darkness. 135 flood victims who never got help. This is the record of Kristi Noem's tenure. This is what accountability looks like. And Raskin just played it for the entire country to see.